there, my name is Megan and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about my 5 least favorite or most disappointing books of 2022. But before we go ahead and get on into the books, if you are not already subscribed to my channel, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button as well as the little bell icon so you can be notified every time I post new content. I post new videos every Monday, Thursday, and Saturday, and sometimes other days throughout the week. Also, don't forget to check down in the description box below for links to all of my social media, my Buddy Read Discord, and my Patreon, where you can be entered into winning book giveaways from me. So I do have reviews for most of these books, and I will link those up in the cards if you're interested in learning more about why I did not like them, but these books are in no particular order. First, we have The House Across the Lake by Riley Sager. This is an adult thriller, and I think it's the 4th Riley Sager book I've read, and I've really enjoyed all the other ones I've read, and I will continue to keep reading him. I just think this book was a one-off for me, and it follows a main character named Casey, and she is an actress, but she is dealing with the death of her husband who drowned in the lake where their Vermont vacation home is located, and she's just, resorted to alcohol and just not having a good time of it. And she ends up befriending a woman who lives across the lake from her who is a supermodel, and her husband who is a social media entrepreneur. And one day, Catherine, the model across the lake, goes missing, and Casey has been spying on them using binoculars and thinks she sees some foul play with regards to Catherine's husband. So Casey takes it upon herself to investigate to see if Catherine was murdered, or if she actually just decided to leave without telling anybody. There was a couple reasons I didn't really like this book. The first one is that I just found that I was not engaged at all in the story or the main character, Casey. I both physically read this and I listened to the audio, and I really had no desire to really pick this book up. Nothing about it was interesting. I found it a little bit boring, and really nothing that Riley Sager was offering me was wanting me to keep finding out what was happening, but I ended up getting through the book, obviously. And then secondly, there was a paranormal element to this book that I wasn't expecting, and this is the first time that Riley Sager has done this, at least in the book that I've read, and it just didn't sit well with me. I just didn't like the way it was executed. I think that he had a lot of other options that he could have used to tell the same story that would have made more sense and would have made a more interesting story, because it almost wasn't a cop-out, oh, this is paranormal, it can't be explained. It was just way too convenient for me, and I just felt like the plot was weakened because of that. So this was definitely the least favorite Riley Sager book that I've read, but I do want to continue to read other of his thrillers. Next, we have A Plague of Giants by Kevin Hearn. This is book 1 in the 7 Kennings, and this is an adult fantasy, and this book is super hard to explain the plot, to be honest, and I read this, I think this was the first book I finished in January 2022, so that was a year ago, and I really can't remember that much about it, but I remember the reasons that I didn't like it. The main reasons I didn't like it is that I felt like the writing was amateurish. And not to say that that's a bad thing, because authors have to start somewhere and they develop their craft, they get better over time. And this was supposed to be a more antiquated setting, and it just sounded like all of his characters were teenagers from 2020. And there was a disconnect for me. And then another thing that I didn't like was that a lot of things happened in the story, in the plot, where these characters would die or these characters would experience hardship, and no emotion was evoked from me at all, because the author hadn't taken time, or at least done it well, to help me feel for these characters, to feel for their experiences. I just felt no connection to any of these characters or any of their stories, and there was a ton of characters, so it was almost a little bit too much. So it's an epic book, epic proportions, really detailed world that was well done, but it was just too much. It really took away from me caring about these characters or this world. So I decided not to continue with this series. The next book is A Ruin of Roses by K.F. Breene. This is I'm going to say it's a romance fantasy, not a fantasy romance, because the romance is definitely the main part of this book. And if you guys have been around for any amount of time, you know that Beauty and the Beast is my favorite fairy tale. I love reading Beauty and the Beast retellings. So the premise for this book is kind of different. So we do have a prince who is cursed, and he's cursed to be this dragon type being. And then we have a main character who lives in a village outside of, I'm going to call it the princedom. And the princedom is kind of frozen in time, but time passes outside. And our main character has to go into this forbidden forest on the prince's land in order to retrieve this flower, who she extracts an antidote from for this illness that a lot of people in the village are experiencing. So one day she's trespassing, and the prince in dragon form finds her and takes her back to his castle. And then we kind of learn more about how she might help break the spell and the enchantment that he's under. So the premise sounded really good, and I found it interesting. However, the smut part of this book way overpowered the actual plot, and the plot was okay. But not only was the smut overpowering, like it was incredibly vulgar. And that's just my personal preference and my personal opinion. It might be absolutely fine and good to a lot of people, but it was just too much for me. So it was almost like if you think about authors and their word choice, like you can explain something using words that have a more positive connotation, and then you can use words that just evoke like negative feelings and disgust. And those are the words that our author chose. Like she was describing sexual situations and scenes that could have been described perfectly well and romantically and sweet and decided to make them dirty and vulgar. And that's what she did for every single thing. And it just got really old really, really quickly. And to be honest, our main characters didn't even have sex yet. So it tells you that she was already had all this stuff in here that was off-putting. I can't imagine how much more is going to be in the rest of the series. So for that reason alone, I'm not going to continue this series. Unfortunately, it makes me sad. But if you guys have any other recommendations for good Beauty and the Beast retellings, feel free to drop them in the comments because I'm always looking. Then we have For the Wolf by Hannah Witten. This is the first book in the Wilderwood series, and I think the second book is out at this point. And this is, or was, advertised as a Red Riding Hood retelling. In my opinion, it is nothing like Red Riding Hood. It is way more like Beauty and the Beast. Because in this world, every single time that a monarch, a queen, has two daughters, the second daughter is sent off into the Wilderwood to be sacrificed to the wolf. And the country does this because they are trying to get back these kings that were supposedly taken by the Wilderwood and are held captive, and they want these kings back. And there's just a big misconception about who the wolf is and exactly what happens when these kings were taken and what the Wilderwood actually is and represents. And the wolf is actually a man, and he is a warden of this forest, and he lives in the forest in this huge castle, and that is where our main character, Red, or Redaris, has to go. And there were some things that I did like about this book. I really liked the dark forest aspect. It was very like grim fairy tale-esque. I, thought that was really well done. But there was just a lot of things I didn't like about it, mainly the interactions between the two main characters, because the author tried to focus a lot of the not a lot of the story, but tried to make a big focus of the relationship or the romance between the wolf and Red. And I just didn't connect with it. I really didn't feel anything. There were these scenes where the two characters were, kissing and really falling in love for each other. And I was just like, so bored, rolling my eyes, like, come on, let's shuffle through this and get back to the main plot. And I was bored through a lot of this book. I really can't put my finger on why I didn't like it very much. I don't know. It just didn't work for me. I didn't connect with it for one reason or another, but I would not recommend it because I feel like a lot of people would like this book. It just did not mesh with me at all. And the last book is Nano by Robin Cook. This is a medical thriller. It is the first book that I've read by him, and it is fairly lowly rated on Goodreads, so that should have been a clue that it wasn't very good. But it follows a main character named Pia, and Pia decides to go to work for this nanotechnology company, and she starts to uncover some strange things that are happening with regards to like humans that are being experimented on, and nanotechnology is being used to increase their athletic performance, but it's having all of these negative effects and essentially killing them, and she has to unravel the mystery. So the plot itself sounds good and interesting, and that's what I was going off of, but there were just so many things about this book that I really could not stand. The writing, Robin Cook is not a good writer. Like, he tells us everything about these characters instead of allowing us to infer. His depiction of men in this book was laughable. It was horrible. All they do is want to have sex with the main character, every single man, and there was no ending to this book. So you have your normal, plot that's supposed to have a resolution, supposed to have an ending. This book did not have one, and I'm assuming that maybe he's going to write a sequel or has written a sequel. I honestly don't know. I don't care at this point, but we were up to like the end of the book. I was listening to the audio. I was 30 minutes away from the end, and I was like, how's he going to end this book? Yeah, he didn't. So I wasted all of my time reading this horrible book that had horrible characterization, bad writing, only to not get an ending. I was like, I wasted my time. So I was angry upon finishing because I get mad when I feel like I wasted my time. All right, you guys, that is it for the books that just did not work for me last year. They were definitely disappointing. I did not like them. Let me know in the comments some of your least favorite books of last year, or if you've read any of these and what you've thought of them, and I will see y'all in another video soon. Goodbye. you.